There exists a critical infinitesimal fracture in time, a split second that occurs immediately after someone challenges your integrity, questions your value, or attacks your character. In that high-pressure vacuum, the average individual defaults to their social programming. They panic and they capitulate. They instinctively rush to defend their ego. "You've got it wrong. That wasn't my intention. Please let me explain myself." It sounds like the reasonable diplomatic path to take. It feels like the moral high ground. But to a student of Niccolo Machiavelli, that impulse is the precise moment you forfeit your crown, because the instant you scramble to defend yourself, you're signaling to the room that you are fragile enough to be injured. In the ruthless theater of power dynamics, perception creates reality. If they witness you flinching, they do not see a misunderstood victim. They see a wounded animal. They smell blood in the water. This is the brutal unspoken law that Machiavelli mastered centuries ago. The man who feels compelled to explain himself inevitably lowers himself. Conversely, the man who refuses to explain forces the entire world to create a defense on his behalf. Let us be absolutely crystal clear about the mechanics here. Defending yourself almost never results in persuasion. It results in submission. It shifts the center of gravity away from you. When you start justifying your choices, you have stepped onto their playing field. You are operating within their frame of reference. You are implicitly agreeing to a contract that says, "You have the authority to judge me, and I am obligated to answer." Once you grant them that jurisdiction, they own the narrative completely. Even if your logic is flawless, you still appear guilty simply because only the subservient rush to clarify their standing. The truly powerful, they let the silence burn the oxygen out of the room. They allow the accusation to hang in the air untouched and unacknowledged because they understand. The ultimate countermove is psychological reflection. Turn their words into a mirror. Make them question their own stability. Make them appear overly emotional, frantic, and pressed. Make them look obsessed, bitter, and unhinged. Because in any verbal confrontation, the one who speaks the most usually holds the least amount of cards. Machiavelli knew that whoever establishes the frame determines the victor. The vast majority of people fall into the trap of defensiveness because they have a deep-seated need to be understood. They operate under the delusion that if they just provide enough context, clarify every detail, and repeat their good intentions, they will be vindicated. But this belief stems from emotional insecurity, not strategic intelligence. In the realm of power, you do not want clarity. You want dominance. Clarity is for your therapist. Control is for the boardroom. And true, sovereignty does not come from being understood by the masses. It comes from being feared, respected, and remaining an enigma. So when an adversary labels you as arrogant, cold Machiavellian or manipulative, and you immediately snap back with, "No, I'm not," you don't get it. You have already lost the war. You are reacting to their stimulus. You are proving that their opinion holds weight over your emotional state. You have handed the ball directly to them. By doing so, you sacrifice the most potent weapon in your arsenal mystery. Reflect on the most formidable figures you have ever encountered in your life. They were rarely the loudest, nor were they the ones seeking approval. They were the ones who wielded silence like a physical blade. The individuals who could make you second-guess your entire existence just by holding a steady gaze. The ones who, when attacked, did not even blink. Machiavelli would instruct you on this fundamental truth. He who explains submits. He who remains silent compels others to fill in the terrifying blanks, and invariably they will overestimate his capacity for retaliation. That is the game. When you refuse to react, you disrupt their dopamine loop. They become visibly uncomfortable. They begin to doubt the validity of their own attack. They look around the room for social validation and find only a void. Suddenly, their perceived power evaporates while your stature expands. Why? Because you have executed the one maneuver no emotional creature can withstand. You force them to debate with themselves, and that is how you invert the power dynamic. You allow their accusation to wither and die in the echo of its own irrelevance. Let us take this deeper into the psychology. Imagine walking into a high-stakes environment. Someone throws a verbal jab, subtle shade, or a direct insult regarding your success, your attitude, or your history. Every head turns waiting for your rebuttal. And here is your move. Absolute zero. You say nothing. No defensive posture, no witty comeback, no smirk. Just a calm, terrifying stillness. In that precise moment, you become untouchable. Everyone in that room is forced to internally process a new set of questions. Why is he not rattled? Does he know something we do not? Is he so far above us that this does not even register? Did that attack just make him stronger? You have effectively flipped the entire socials hierarchy. People stop analyzing the accusation and start obsessing over your response. And silence, when projected, with absolute confidence, screams louder than any justification ever could. Machiavelli was not merely a student of statecraft. He was a master of human psychology. He understood one principle better than anyone else. Power is not defined by what you say. It is defined by what people suspect you're capable of saying, but choose to withhold. Now consider the coldest, most advanced maneuver of all. Sometimes you do not merely ignore the accusation. You lean into it. Someone calls you manipulative. You smile, look right through them, and softly say, "If that is how you perceive it." Not defensive, not apologetic, just cool, detached neutrality. Watch what happens. They scramble. They were banking on a fight to drag you down to their level. They wanted to see you squirm. Instead, they are left holding a grenade that never went off. That is when the shame begins to rot them from the inside. They start wondering if they went too far, if they look foolish, if they have exposed their own insecurity to the group. And the answer is yes, they have. You took the toxic energy they hurled at you and forced them to carry the weight of it without lifting a single finger. There is a specific threshold where silence becomes physically unbearable, not for you, but for the one demanding a reaction. That is the tipping point. They thought they were the prosecutor. Now they are exposed as the desperate child begging for attention. And you have transcended the need to be innocent. You have become something far more dangerous. You have become untouchable. Machiavelli understood a reality that the average person will never grasp. Words are not tools to clarify the truth. They are veils used to obscure it. And when an adversary launches a subtle dig or a frontal assault, understand their true objective. They are trying to drag you into the fog of war. They need to submerge you in a swamp of emotional justification. Because the moment you start over-explaining, your authority dissolves. The more words you use to defend yourself, the less conviction you project. Instead of taking the bait, allow them to scream into the void. Watch what unfolds when you refuse to engage. They inevitably overcompensate. They begin to repeat their accusations, their voice pitches up, and they start to look desperate, emotionally volatile, and unhinged. You have said absolutely zero words yet. The dynamic has shifted. They are now the one on trial because the audience, whether one person or a boardroom, stops listening to the actual words. They start analyzing behavior. They are observing who remains stoic and who is rattling their own cage. This is the essence of true social dominance. It does not stem from being factually correct. It stems from being completely impenetrable. Consider a high-stakes scenario in the corporate world of 2026. You're presenting, and a rival attempts to undermine you with a passive-aggressive comment like, "I am not entirely convinced that particular strategy has been fully vetted." Or perhaps, "He always comes to the table with these wild, unrealistic fantasies." Make no mistake, they are hunting for a reaction. They need you to snap at the lure. How does the average person respond? They lean in aggressively. They start listing data points. They try to prove their worth. They stutter. The entire room detects the scent of fear and insecurity. But the true Machiavellian operator does the opposite. He leans back in his chair, opening up his posture. He pauses. He might even offer a slight knowing smile. When he finally speaks, it is never a defense. It is a lethal redirection. Interesting perspective. Why don't you walk us through your superior alternative right now? The spotlight instantly swings back. The attacker is forced to perform, and the room's energy flips. Suddenly, they are the one being audited. They are sweating under the pressure because the silence of a confident man is an unspoken indictment. It has the power to make others feel microscopic without you lifting a finger. In the realm of romantic or deep personal dynamics, this trap is even more treacherous. Imagine your partner accuses you, "You simply do not prioritize me anymore." The standard reaction is immediate panic. The average person will launch into a frantic monologue of apologies, excuses, and reassurances, and by doing so, they unknowingly accept the premise that they are the villain. The Machiavellian protocol is entirely different. You do not dismiss their feelings, but you do not debate them either. You let the heaviness of their accusation hang in the air. You observe as they feel the awkward weight of their own dramatic outburst echoing in the silence. Then, with absolute calm, you deliver the verdict. That is not how I view this situation. It is short, anchored in certainty, and devoid of justification. Now the ground beneath them shakes. They begin to doubt their own perception. They wonder if they were being too aggressive or irrational because in that decisive moment, you seized control of the most valuable asset in any conflict, the emotional tempo. And always remember, whoever dictates the speed of the interaction dictates the reality. But there is a deeper, colder layer to this strategy for when things get toxic. Do not just remain calm when targeted. Become a ghost. When someone insults you, offer no reply, no counterattack. Do not acknowledge their existence, but crucially, do not block them either. Let your total absence act as a mirror reflecting their own insanity. Let them rot in the silence of being utterly ignored. This destroys the human psyche in two specific ways. First, they realize you did not even consider them significant enough to type a response. Second, they begin to construct paranoid internal narratives, and 99% of the time this self-inflicted psychological torture dismantles their composure. Why does this work? Because the average human being relies on external validation to survive. Even in a fight. If you strip away that feedback loop, they starve. They begin to spiral out of control. They post attention-seeking content. They gossip to mutual friends. They try increasingly desperate tactics to bait a response. And with every frantic attempt, they appear weaker, more obsessed, and more unstable to everyone watching. Meanwhile, you remain a statue, perfectly, still perfectly unbothered. That is the moment of total victory. Not because you won a debate, but because they self-destructed while trying to claw a reaction out of you. Now let's elevate this to the elite tier. Instead of shielding yourself when attacked, you use verbal judo to frame their accusation as a confession of their own weakness. If someone calls you arrogant, realize what they are saying. It is strange that my confidence makes you feel so incredibly insecure. If someone labels you manipulative, understand the subtext. Usually, only those who are frustrated that they cannot control you will use that word. If someone calls you fake, it is often because everyone says that when you stop giving them exactly what they want. You do not just deny the label. You twist it until it reveals their hidden inadequacy. And now they are the ones scrambling to defend their character. It is not merely a reversal of the script. It is a psychological judo throw that slams them into the mat. You utilized their own emotional momentum to orchestrate their public collapse. Niccolo Machiavelli would call this twisting the blade. Never meet a sword with a shield when you can let the attacker trip and fall onto their own weapon. Society conditions you, to furiously defend your reputation to clarify your intentions to clear your good name. But Machiavelli identified the trap centuries ago. He knew that the second you chase after innocence, you are implicitly admitting that your guilt is a possibility. The grand strategist never plays that game. Instead, he appears too solid to be rattled, too high status to care, and too certain of his own position to degrade himself with an explanation. Slowly, those who attempt to dismantle him start to appear volatile, reactive, envious, and pathetic. Because the harder you try to defend, the more it looks like you have something to hide. But the more you ignore, the more dangerous and powerful people assume you are. That assumption is the bedrock where true power is forged. The majority of people operate under the delusion that power is about proving your merit, proving you are correct, proving you are not the villain they paint you to be, proving you're better than their limited perception allows. But Machiavelli would scoff at this neediness because the instant you try to prove anything to anyone, you have already validated their judgment as worthy of your attention. And when you hand a person that level of validation, you might as well hand them a leash and a collar. Let's apply this to a group setting a dinner party or a team meeting. Someone throws a sharp public jab at you. You always act like the smartest person in the room. Or, oh look, he's grandstanding again. I guess humility isn't in your vocabulary. What is the instinctive reaction? People tense up physically. They try to laugh it off awkwardly. Or worse, they dive into a defensive explanation trying to smooth over the tension, thinking they are saving face. But in reality, all they are doing is confirming that the arrow landed and the wound is bleeding, has officially landed and the damage is done. The moment you rush to shield yourself, the entire room shifts its focus to your defense, validating the attack. By trying to block the blow, you inadvertently prove that the strike was accurate enough to hurt. Here is how the high-status strategist operates in 2026. You do not flinch. You do not speak. You engage in a deliberate, suffocating pause. You hold total silence for exactly 2 seconds, an eternity in social dynamics. You scan the environment, but you never show anger. Aggression signals pain. Instead, you project a sense of quiet, detached amusement, as if you are watching a child throw a tantrum. Then, and only if absolutely necessary, you offer a response that is calm, surgical, and utterly dismissive. You might say, "You seem unusually emotional today," or "That is certainly a perspective," or perhaps you offer nothing at all. You simply maintain a long, unblinking gaze that pierces through their social mask. The psychological result is inevitable. The dynamic flips instantly. The attacker begins to shift their weight. They fidget nervously. Their eyes dart around the room, seeking validation from others, but they find none. They might even try to awkwardly explain the punchline of their failed joke. They suddenly feel the intense heat of social pressure turning against them. Your absolute lack of reaction has communicated a message far more powerful than any verbal argument ever could. It says you're above their judgment. You have effectively removed yourself from the trial, placing them on the witness stand. In the ruthless digital arena, these dynamics escalate with terrifying speed. Negative comments, call-out posts, direct messages, everyone is baiting you. They are desperate for a reaction, hungry for your energy. Here is the cold truth that Niccolo Machiavelli would sear into your consciousness if he were alive today. In the court of public opinion, silence is often mistaken for guilt, unless that silence is heavy enough to command fear. So we must refine the tactic for the modern age. When you are targeted online or offline, do not defend yourself. Do not explain your intentions. Distort the frame. You never address the specific claim made against you. Instead, you take their kinetic energy and redirect it back into the audience like a master of social judo. Let us look at a concrete example. Someone claims you are toxic or manipulative. The average person would post a 3-paragraph defense or a tearful video pleading for understanding. This is fatal. Instead, you post a single detached observation. People always label you dangerous when they realize they can no longer control you. Analyze what just happened. You did not deny the claim. You did not whine. You reframed the entire accusation into a badge of honor and high status. You transformed their attack into proof of your own power. Now the attacker looks bitter and powerless, while you appear completely unfazed and psychologically impenetrable. The audience stops looking at the accusation and starts looking at the dynamic. They begin to question who is actually holding the frame. This is not damage control. This is total narrative dominance. To execute this properly, we must get even more surgical with our methods. There are 3 specific tools you must master to replace the weak habit of self-defense. First is silence the default state. It is cold-heavy and leaves the opponent exposed to their own insecurities. Second is deflection. This involves reframing the narrative entirely without ever acknowledging the specific jab they threw at you. Third is what I call precision cuts. These are short, sharp truths designed to end the game. These cuts sever the interaction immediately. Let us practice. Someone says, "You are so full of yourself." You do not deny it. You respond, "Confidence always upsets the insecure." They try again. You are fake. You reply calmly, "I do not owe you my authenticity." They escalate. You think you're better than everyone else. You lock eyes and say, "No, I just do not think like everyone else." Do you see the pattern? These are not defenses. They are assertions of higher status. They do not say, "I am innocent." They say, "You are too far beneath me to land a blow." That is the core philosophy. The Machiavellian operator never begs the crowd to see him as a good person. He dares the crowd to see him as a villain, and he walks taller because of it. When you fundamentally refuse to defend yourself, a fascinating psychological phenomenon occurs within your enemies. They become unhinged. They prepared for a battle, but they are swinging at smoke. The lack of resistance disrupts their OODA loop. Observe Orient Decide Act, causing them to panic. They start escalating their behavior. They push harder, get louder, and become more dramatic. In doing so, they expose the depth of their own insecurity and obsession. The more they flail, the more you rise in the estimation of the tribe. Why? Because you have manipulated them into performing their own public collapse. This is the Machiavellian endgame. You do not need to destroy your enemies directly. You simply allow their obsession with you to destroy them from the inside out. You might think being misunderstood is a dangerous position, but let me tell you, being predictable is a fate far worse than death. The misunderstood man possesses mystery. The predictable man is boring safe and incredibly easy to manipulate. People who constantly rush to clear the air are viewed as desperate and low value. Those who remain calmly misunderstood are viewed with a mixture of awe and fear. Machiavelli understood this deeply. It is far safer to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. But in 2026, it is even better to be confusing than to be predictable. The confused opponent is cautious. He hesitates. He watches you warily because he cannot calculate your next move. He does not act rashly. This hesitation grants you total control over the field of play. Let us crush the final illusion holding you back. You do not need a good reputation to win the game of power. You need a strong reputation. The man with a good reputation is expected to be clean, soft, and agreeable. He is easily cornered by his own morality. The man with a strong reputation is different. He is not always liked. He is certainly not always trusted. But no one dares to move against him casually. That is the result of never defending yourself. Your reputation shifts from being about your moral standing to being about your capability. It becomes about what people fear you might do next. This is how you flip the power dynamic permanently. You stop fighting for the approval of the sheep. Instead, you cultivate an aura that makes the wolves cautious. Even your silence begins to feel like a calculated strategic decision. Every move you do not make becomes a terrifying possibility in their minds. The final evolution of this mindset is not just silence, it is aura. It is a presence so composed, so internally secure, and so far above the petty noise of the crowd that accusations evaporate. They dissolve before they can even make contact with your character. This level of power does not come from suppressing your emotions or acting like a robot. It comes from being unbothered by design. It is a trained response. Once you have disciplined yourself not to defend, not to explain, and not to seek external validation, you cross a threshold. You cross a line where your very existence becomes your defense. That is the moment when power becomes effortless. Consider the few people in history who never explained themselves. They do not post long rants on social media. They do not correct the record in interviews. They do not argue with their critics in the comment sections. And yet, paradoxically, people respect them more. Why is this? Because silence in the face of accusation creates a vacuum, and that vacuum creates myth. It invites interpretation. The human mind hates a vacuum. When left without a clear explanation, the mind fills the void with assumptions of strength and competence. People assume you must be dangerous. They assume you must know something they do not. They assume you are so secure in your reality that you do not even blink when challenged. That assumption, that projection of strength, is what compels people to follow you. Machiavelli did not care about being a good man. He cared about being an effective one. He cared about being in control. And the ultimate form of control is refusing to play a game that you did not design. Stop defending. Start commanding. Real control isn't about shouting the loudest. It is about who holds the frame. The individual who refuses to defend themselves effectively masters the art of perception, maintaining dominance, even when the air is thick with deceit and fabrication. Here lies the fundamental, psychological paradox that most people miss. The moment you start over-explaining or justifying your actions, you inadvertently isolate yourself. You signal insecurity. When you remain busy fighting your own battles and frantically arguing on your own behalf, no one else feels compelled to intervene. However, shift the dynamic. If you remain stoic, completely silent, and visibly unfazed by the chaos, you create a psychological vacuum. Witnesses instinctively feel a growing urge to step in and protect you. You will hear the whispers shift in your favor. That was completely uncalled for. Or, why is he attacking him like that? They notice that while the aggressor is losing their mind, you have not even dignified the attack with a response. Suddenly, the aggressor looks unhinged, and the bystanders transform into your personal shield. Ask yourself, what is more powerful than defending your own honor? What is? When? Maneuvering the social board so that others fight for you without you ever asking a single favor. This is the essence of true Machiavellian leverage. You allow the crowd to argue your case and validate your status while you sit comfortably above the noise, untouched and pristine. In that moment, you are not merely respected, you are elevated to a higher tier of social hierarchy. This level of presence is not built overnight. You construct it, methodically like an impenetrable fortress, placing one heavy stone upon another. It requires radical restraint. It demands that you consistently choose absolute stillness over the temptation of an emotional reaction. It is achieved by never uttering a single word more than is strictly necessary. If you want to master this in 2026, start here. Never correct insults that are designed solely to provoke you. When someone throws verbal bait, let them speak into the void. Let their harsh words hang in the air until the silence becomes awkward, for them, not you. Your lack of response signals to the entire room that the insult was so insignificant it did not even register on your radar. Instead, respond to passive-aggressive jabs with a look of calm confusion rather than offense. A simple, "Oh, is that how you see it?" delivered with total serenity is devastating. It completely dismantles the kinetic emotional energy fueling their attack, leaving them looking foolish and overly invested. Master the art of the short closing phrase rather than offering a defense. Noted. Okay. You're free to think that. Time will tell. Each of these phrases slams the door on the interaction. They do not invite further debate. They suffocate the oxygen out of the conversation and end the scene immediately. You must also obsessively study your own physiology, how you hold your face, your posture, and your gaze. The Machiavellian operator never twitches, never flinches, and never tenses up under pressure. Absolute physical stillness is his armor. The contrast is what creates the power. The more immobile you remain, while others are losing their emotional control, the more your authority expands silently in the room. When your adversaries realize they no longer possess the codes to provoke you, they begin to fear you. You become dangerous because you are unpredictable, not in an erratic, crazy way, but in a way that is completely unreadable. You become a mirror that reflects their own chaos and instability back at them, amplifying their insecurity. As Machiavelli might observe in this era, the most dangerous man is not the one who lashes out first. It is the one who never needs to attack at all. Eventually, you will reach a tipping point where the disrespect stops, not because you fought every battle, but because people intuitively know they will lose before they even open their mouths. Your very presence radiates a clear frequency. I do not play defense. I simply allow others to destroy themselves while they exhaust their energy trying to reach me. You must understand the profound difference between mere strength and true immunity. Strength can still be hurt. It flinches, it reacts, and it gets emotional even if it eventually wins the fight. Immunity, however, is a different beast entirely. It does not even acknowledge that a hit was thrown. That is the Machiavellian ideal we strive for. You do not aim to win the argument. You aim to nullify the argument before it even starts by never feeling the compulsion to answer it. When you effectively stop defending yourself, people cease viewing you as someone who needs to be put on trial. You signal that you are not on their level. You have transcended the petty court of public approval. You operate by a different set of laws where the only judgment that holds any weight is your own. From this point forward, you do not live in defense. You live in definition. You are the architect of your reality. You define your image. You define your tone. You define the meaning of your silence. People can feel that shift physically. They sense the unshakable certainty behind your eyes, the calmness in your posture, and the latent danger lurking in your quietude. You are no longer resisting the world. You are commanding it. And that is the moment the energy in the room shifts. The crowd speaks less. Your enemies grow quieter. Your name begins to carry a heavy weight, not because you fought desperately for it, but because you never lowered yourself to explain it. However, understand this distinction: never defending yourself does not mean never speaking. It means speaking only when your words shift the balance of power. When you choose to say something, it should feel like a calculated move on a chessboard, not a reactive flinch. Because every single time you refuse to explain yourself, every time you hold perfectly still while the rest of the world spins in chaos, you become the one variable they simply cannot control: a man who answers to no one but himself.